Hello gamers and welcome back. I'm Rob, of course, at Warshak if you want to call me by my in-game name. And we've got some exciting news. A week ago, or about 2 weeks ago, they announced that they're going to be doing a balance changes to a few of the key cards that they find that are really annoying for players to play against on ladder and are fit a little too nicely in some of those tier 1, tier 2 decks. And a lot of players just don't have a fun time playing against it, nor do they have a fun time actually playing it themselves. But they didn't really announce which cards that will see the changes. They only said that they're going to change these cards after the HTC. Luckily for us, they just made a recent post talking about all the cards that they're changing. And then also keep in mind that the last HTC tournament to take in effect is going to be this upcoming weekend, the 18th and the 19th of May. So after that, I'm assuming they'll roll out these changes early next week, probably on that Tuesday, if the latest that Thursday. I'm assuming. But that's just what they've said so far. So let's take a look at the changes that they've made so far. They didn't actually change a ton of cards, but the cards that they did change are actually a pretty big deal and are seen in a variety of different decks. And those decks are highly annoying. One of them being a deck that we really don't play a lot because I don't play Wild, but a card that people have been complaining about for months now. In the Wild format, that's going to be the Naga Sea Witch. So what they did was they upped the mana cost from 5 to 8, and this is because her ability was reduce cards cost 5 and then in conjunction with Molten Giant, Mountain Giant, and there's a couple other giants that combo with her. You were basically able to on turn 5 play like 3 to 6 8/8 giants, if I remember that correctly, or I have the combo correctly. But it was basically a turn 5, throw up 8/8s on the board. Can your opponent deal with it? Most of the time not. There's no 5 mana card that's going to kill a bunch of 8/8s, upwards of 6 of them. So it was a really lame kind of deck to play, and it dominated from what I hear ladder. Again, I don't play Wild ladder, but I heard it was a very, very oppressive deck, really annoying to play against, and it didn't require you to set up some labyrinth combo. It didn't require your deck to revolve around this. It was draw Naga Sea Witch, or have as much draw as possible in the early game, and then you just throw up with a bunch of 8/8s, and that's really not fun for anybody. So they increased the cost of her so you can't do this huge combo on turn 8. Is she going to actually see any play after this? Probably not. I mean, maybe a turn 8 and then you throw up a bunch of 8/8s on 8 is decent, but then you're heading into turns, you got the Mage who can Blizzard and Doomsayer, you have cards like Twisting Nether and Warlock. So at that point in the later stages of the game, when you have a decent amount of mana to play with, you're going to be able to deal with these 8/8s a little bit more efficiently than your opponent playing them on turn 5. Which, as we know, turn 5, dealing with just a Void Daddy from a Lackey coin Dark Pact, and then having to deal with a Void Daddy on turn 5 is really annoying, right? But imagine dealing with 5 or 6 8/8s. I mean, that's just so much more devastating. So definitely a change that I'm sure a lot of the player base who does play Wild is going to like very, very much, because I'm sure this was not a very fun combo to play against at all. So the next card that we're going to take a look at is going to be the Spiteful Summoner nerf. And for those of you who enjoy Spiteful Summoner and you've been playing it for a while now, you're like, oh man, this card sucks now. The card really still isn't that bad. It'll probably still see play. The 1 mana difference, it hurts the card, but it doesn't hurt it enough to make this card just absolutely awful. You play this card because it basically plays a 10 mana minion. So you're still playing a 7 mana, 10 mana minion, and you still get the 4/4 body out of it. So the card is still good. It's just not absolutely broken, where if you play you coin on 5 Spiteful, it's just so sick. Now you coin on 6 Spiteful and you get it on, or you play the 7 mana and you can get it on 6 instead. Still a solid card in my opinion, just makes the deck a little bit less powerful, and it gives you a little bit more time to be able to deal with and or draw the utilities in your deck, to be able to, kill one of the Sea Giants, the Emerus, the Ultra Sword, the Deathwing that comes out of this. And, unfortunately, if Tyrantus comes out, you still can't deal with it unless you play Voodoo Doctors in your deck, or not Voodoo Doctor, Voodoo Dolls in your deck, if you're a Mage or a Warlock. But overall, another good solid change in my opinion. I think anything more than, if they would have made this 8 mana, it would have been kind of pointless. I mean, at that point, you're only 2 mana off the 10 mana minion anyway. Plus, on top of that, you have to run the card, and then the card still has to be in your deck. I think another decent change that they could have done to this card that I actually saw a lot of was, and when instead of you still reveal the spell from your deck, and and it summons a minion to its mana cost, but it actually gets rid of that spell in your deck when it does that. So it basically turns that spell into a minion. And I thought that was a pretty decent change to the card. Now it's probably a lot bigger hit. My recommendation was probably a much bigger hit than this, because at least this, you still keep the spell in your deck. All they did was increase 1 mana to the card. But my recommendation would actually keep it at 6, but then they actually lose the spell from their deck, which is a pretty heavy cost to play, which means that maybe they would play other cards in their deck, maybe like 8 mana or 6 mana, just to be able to tempo out 2 minions, and they're not really worried about always losing their 10 mana spell. Even if they create like a 6 mana card, you know, it's still decent because they still kept their 10 mana and they still tempoed some cards on the board. So we might have seen like a little bit different play from Spiteful, not only going for like the 10 mana cards, but also like maybe 6 and 8s. So decent change. Spiteful decks will probably still see play with this change, to be honest. It's not like a too big of a hit. It's not like a Warsong Commander hit, but it's also not like it helps all around. All right, so the next card we're going to take a look at is going to be the Dark Pact. It will restore 4 health down from 8. It still costs 1 mana. And I think the 1 mana mark is what, well, not only does it destroy the minion, it costs 1 mana, and I think that's where its full effect comes in. The healing was just like a nice touch, and the 8 health was huge. I mean, that's a third of your health for 1 mana, plus you get to kill the minion. And we all know the Warlock's always Dark Pact, whether it be the Voodoo Doll, so they, you know, target your minion, kill it with Voodoo Doll, and then you kill the Voodoo Doll, which kills the minion. Or they use this on Cube, right? After they've cubed their Void Lord or Void Daddy or their Doom Guard. So restoring 4 health instead of 8, I mean, against particular matchups like Tempo Mage or some more aggressive, you know, Face Hunter, this helps a lot because that you're basically healing for half. But in the matchups that the Warlock didn't need healing anyway, so like against the Control Mirrors, for example, they're not, you know, most of the time in the early game, they're not really taking any damage anyway, so they're at 22, 24, you know, 20, and if they heal back up to 24, or they're at 24, they heal to 28 instead of 30, that really doesn't change anything. I mean, the card, its effect in its own is the 1 mana, be able to combo, kill your own minion, and then the healing, like I said, was just kind of like a bonus, because you have Gul'dan for healing in the late game, or the late game, you have Spellstone for healing in the late game, so I really wouldn't have cared if they kept the restore 4 or restore 8. That doesn't really change. That doesn't really bother me. The part that bothers me is the fact that it costs 1 mana and it lets them destroy their own minion. So I would have rather seen this maybe go to 2 mana and it can still heal for 8. That's fine. Or maybe even 3 mana, still heal for 8. But I don't really particularly like the change on this one too much. Because I feel like Cubelock is still going to be good. Like, this didn't stop Cubelock. This only just, they heal for 4 less. Gul'dan heals them for 3 every turn. The next one, pretty good. Possessed Lackey will cost 6 mana, up from 5. Instead of going, you know, turn 5, Lackey coin Dark Pact, now they have to wait an additional turn, very similar to the Spiteful Summoner. In my opinion, I don't think you'll see 2 Lackeys and Control Warlock anymore. I think you might see like 1 Lackey and Control Warlock, because now drawing them, I don't know. I'll try 1. But obviously 2 Lackeys will still be played in Cubelock as they have more demons in the deck. Therefore, drawing both Lackeys prior than drawing all the demons is much less. But for Control Lock, you know, there's only 2 Void Daddies in the deck and that's it. So most of the time you end up drawing your Lackey, well, it's like 50-50, right? That you draw both your Lackeys before the Voids, or you draw both your Voids before the Lackeys. But if you play 1 Lackey, 2 Voids, it's not as bad, and you can actually add, you know, some more healing because Dark Pact took a hit, and maybe you need more healing to live against the Paladins or whatnot. But regardless, I'm sure everybody who does not like Warlock likes to see Possessed Lackey and Dark Pact get somewhat of a nerf. I think the Possessed Lackey nerf is a lot heavier hit than the Dark Pact nerf. Because like I said, the key of Dark Pact was to be able, it costs 1 mana, kills your own minion, and the healing is just kind of like the bonus effect out of it. Yeah, so not too much there. Decent. Stops. And it just kind of just makes the possessed Lackey turn look like the spiteful turn, and the spiteful turn just take an additional turn. Because before, as we know, like spiteful was on 6, right? So now we have to worry about Lackey on 6 and just spiteful on 7 now. So it kind of just moved everything down a turn, and that's not too bad. It lets you draw into an additional card that could potentially have been really useful. And it also gives you, like I said, just a little bit more time to be able to deal with huge mid-game tempo swings, like being able to possess Lackey, Dark Pact, and or spiteful into a giant minion. So that's pretty. It's decent. I'm sure it'll shake up the meta a little, maybe quite a bit. Hard to say, but I think these changes they'll definitely be better and not for the worst. The next one we're gonna look at is Call to Arms, and I think that's our. Oh no, that's not the last one. Second to last one. So we got Call to Arms, and it's gonna cost 5 mana up from 4. This particular change, I think Brian Kibler had mentioned in one of his videos that he released of cards that he thinks should be changed. So the first thing people think about is, all right, instead of this going an even paladin, it's now going to go an odd paladin because it costs 5 mana instead of 4. But the thing is, now the odd paladin can't run 2-drop cards because 2-drops are against basically what odd paladin can do. So the max that this is going to be able to do is summon 3 1-drop minions, and playing 3 1-drop minions for 5 mana, is that really worth it? You know, you're spending 5 mana for 3 1-drops. Yes, it thins your deck out of 3 cards, which is pretty good, and it brings them on the field, which is a pretty decent tempo play. So we'll have to see where this fits in. I'm sure it'll get tested in Odd Paladin, and if it happens to work out, it'll be decent at best, but I don't think it's going to be near as good, obviously, what it was at 4 mana, because in the even paladin you're able to play, you're able to play Call to Arms in your Murloc paladin. You're able to bring out, your Tide Callers and your Rockpool Hunters, your Righteous Protectors, and all that stuff. While in the, of course, it's at 5 mana. I guess you could still play it in Murloc Paladin. It just costs an additional mana. But for even Paladin, I think that's where it definitely hits home a lot more there. So we'll probably end up seeing Serenite Chain Gang. Like, I think they even mentioned that we'll now have, 2 copies of Serenite Chain Gang in place of the Call to Arms. So for those of you who are wondering what to replace this with, I would recommend Serenite Chain Gang. But good nerf. I don't think they should have hit Paladin too hard, because I don't think the deck's good, but I don't think it's anywhere near where Cubelock is, to be honest. Cubelock is just one of those. Cubelock and Quest Rogue, super oppressive. Like, those decks are just so good that something needed to be changed. Paladin was good, but it wasn't. I never was like, oh man, I hate playing Paladin. I'd much rather play against Paladins all day than Warlocks and Quest Rogues.
I moved just my 11-month research. Anyway.
Yo, Mental Gamer, thanks for the resub, man. I'll answer your question as soon as we finish up this video. The Caverns Below was the last card to get hit with the Blizzard Nerf Hammer. They took it from, this is probably the most nerfed. I think this definitely is the most nerfed quest out of all of them. So originally, you needed to resummon the minions 4 times and get a bunch of 5/5s. Then they changed, you have to resummon the same minion 5 times. And now they've changed the 5 times, or they changed the 5/5 minions into 4/4 minions now. So I feel like this is like Unleash the Hounds all over again. Or was it Starving Buzzard? I think it was Unleash the Hounds. They nerfed that card like 4 times and they just kept changing it. So this is, I'm not sure how this is going to impact it, because I still think a field full of 4/4s is really good. Like being wrecked by Stone Tusk Boar, being Shadow Stepped 3 times, or Brewmastered back, like it's still, they can pump out stupid amounts of damage, but I think it'll be definitely a decent nerf. But I just don't know if it's going to be good enough to make it so, like, if you're playing Control and you get paired up with a Quest Rogue, like how much does that 4/4 instead of 5/5 help you? The first thing that I look at is like Reckless Fury, right? So if we look at like Odd Warrior, you can tank up and now Reckless Fury and kill the board, while before, if you would have Reckless Fury after just tanking up because you don't have any armor, because you just took a beater to the face, like a million 5/5s, right? Like, you're still not going to be able to clear them all. They're going to be at 1 health left, so make sure you have to combo with cards like Whirlwind. But if they had Divine Shield in the first place, with the Wax Elemental does, it just gives you, or Wax, whatever the Wax card, 0 mana, with Divine Shield, but it makes it a 5/5 because of the quest. I think it's called Wax Elemental. Anyway, so the 4/4s, I think heavy control decks may stand more of a chance, is kind of what they pointed out here. It said Quest Rogue should be still a reasonable option versus slow, extreme late game decks, but offer less polarized matchup with more moderate control decks. So it still needs to counter, which I agree. I don't think, there should be no counter to control, but I don't think if you play a control deck and your opponent is playing an anti-control deck, that it should be literally an automatic loss. Like, you lose, 99% of the time. And then you also can look at like Priest, but at the same time, like the Mental Gamer, you mentioned Priest, you still have the, what is it called? The Scream. So you still got Psychic Scream, and that's not terrible depending on what's on the board, but you definitely don't want to put more bounces and draws in their deck, with them not being 5/5. Anduin doesn't take a hit. So yeah, I suppose Control Priest does get a little bit of a not so happy thought when now they have to deal with a bunch of 4/4s, but the rest of the classes dealing with 4/4s is better. I mean, even Mage, if you look at Flame Strike, I mean, being able to Flame Strike all of the minions also helps. So I mean, this nerf could be quite substantial now that I think about it. Like, even Hellfire Defile kills it now. You get 1 to 2 and then you can Joffers, but at 5, I mean, it lives through Flame Strike, lives through just Hero Power, Reckless Fury. Really hard to Hellfire Defile, really hard to lay down at Joffers. So, and by Joffers, I'm talking about Lord Joffrey, or Lord Godfrey, Warlock Legendary. So anyway, solid nerf. All of these classes, I mean, these are all cards that I think are really good, and they wouldn't, it's not, when you have a really good card and it's seen like in a ton of different decks, and when they play that card before you, or they play that card on curve, it feels awful. So them making those cards a little less oomph when they come out and giving you the ability to play around them, I think is a key part to make games feel a little bit sweeter. In regards to not, oh, my opponent had Spiteful on turn 6, I guess I just lose. I mean, that's a really terrible way to play a game, right? Like, oh, they got Tyrantus from their Spiteful on 6, I lose. But if they make more of those like crazy powerful cards that swing games like that later and later into the game, if you're gonna pay 8 to 10 mana for a card, that card better be pretty good, so if it ends up winning you the game, it's not as bad, right? But when you play cards that, like, Fledgling on 3, Lackey on 5, Spiteful on 6, some of those cards you play, they're not even halfway into the game yet, and if one of them ends up attacking your face one time, they end up winning. If you have Dark Pact Lackey with coin, you kind of just win. Like, it feels better with very powerful cards, the mana cost being increased up, so that you have a little bit more time, like I mentioned, to be able to deal with them. All right, so with that wraps up all of the balance changes that are going to be coming, and I'm again I assume these are coming very soon. They mentioned at the end of the HTC tournaments, or the HTC playoffs, which the last one comes into conclusion this upcoming weekend. Like I mentioned here, let me throw out the dates one more time. The Asia Pacific HTC Summer Playoffs Day 1 and Day 2 are May 18th and 19th. So I'm assuming shortly after that we'll see these updates go live, and we'll see how the meta turns out after that. From there, we might do a new monthly meta video, but we'll see how much things shake up. So with that, appreciate you guys watching. Let me know if you think about all of the all of the cards that have changed, and your comments on them in the section below. I always enjoy reading what you guys have to say, of course. So with that, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video and or on Twitch. I'm Robert Warshak, and happy whatever the hell day it is.